In the summer of 1979, Twin Falls, Idaho knew two kinds of heroes, June and Jenny Carver, twin firefighters who seemed to be everywhere a hand was needed. One quiet night, a simple call comes in, just a dog stuck in a storm drain. The sisters roll out in a small truck and vanish into the dark, leaving a town that never stops asking what happened. 32 years later, a gardener turns his shovel on an ordinary patch of ground and hits something that was never meant to be found. What did the gardener uncover? And why does it change everything people thought they knew? Summer 1979 burned bright over Twin Falls, Idaho. The Snake River ran cold below the bridge, and Station 3 smelled of coffee and hose rubber. Two yellow coats shared a hook because June and Jenny Carver did most things together. June talked to animals as if they were neighbors. Jenny fixed anything with a hairpin and a half smile. Captain Ruth Arnett moved through the bay with a marching beat. Check, check, and check again, she said. The twins echoed her and meant it. A trailer burned out by Blue Lakes. A woman stood barefoot in gravel. Jenny took the nozzle. June steadied the woman and spoke like they were on a porch, not beside a stove that wanted to run. The door opened, the room went orange, the hose pushed the fire down. June came back with a singed photograph. The woman laughed and cried at once. A hydrant refused to behave. Jenny popped a cap, frowned, and said, "Gasket's sulking." She slid out a hairpin, teased a loop, tightened a bolt. Water leapt. Ruth pretended not to smile. At noon the cook, George, served chili. "Careful," June told a rookie. George's chili puts out its own fires. After lunch, she calmed a beagle that hated thunder. "You're safe, sir," she whispered, and the dog leaned into her. The town kept an easy rhythm. Rodeo posters curled on poles. CB radios sang through pickup windows. Saturday nights meant a ball game at Rock Creek Park. People knew the twins the way they knew the weather. They waved and asked about smoke alarms and nieces. "We split the bad and double the good," June liked to say. Names drifted through their day. Donna Markley, dispatch trainee with a sharp memory. Hal Derry, fire inspector with a tidy clipboard. Bert Keeler, developer with a radio voice who brought coffee. Caleb Morrow, salvage yard owner and June's boyfriend, arriving in a truck that smelled of oil and sun. Evening slowed the air. Hoses hung straight. The radio murmured small things. Donna practiced the street grid. Ruth listened to the town breathe. Then the desk phone rang. Not the radio. The old phone with the curled cord. Donna lifted the receiver and a thin man's voice rushed through. Dog stuck in the storm drain at Canyon Crest. No name. Behind him, a soft ding-ding, the sugar factory crossing. "Brush 24, Ruth ordered. "Simple assist. Back in an hour." "We'll bring the dog a medal," June said, and Jenny tapped her hairpin. They climbed into the small brush truck. George called from the kitchen, "Bring me back a story." June waved. "Your chili already stole the show." They rolled past open windows and low radios, past the Roxy Theater with half-fallen letters, toward new homes on Canyon Crest. The land tilted to irrigation ditches and the quiet run of water below. June liked to say the city wore two faces. One above ground, one in the pipes. Near a concrete lid stamped 9B, they parked. 9B, Jenny Reed. B for Beagle. June knelt by the grate. "Here, buddy." Only echo answered. The distant bell clanged again. They checked the upstream culvert and shined a light. No eyes flashed back. Jenny eased two stubborn bolts. June slid a glove along the lip and frowned. "Fresh scratches," she said. The street was quiet, lawns trimmed, a sprinkler clicking like a slow clock. "Feels like someone's watching." "Or you skipped dessert," Jenny said. They lowered a short ladder and went down together because that was the rule they made when they were 10. Night rose while they worked. Porch lights blinked on. The brush truck sat under a streetlight. Back at the station, people expected an Easy rescue, and the telling of it later over coffee. When an hour passed without radio chatter, Ruth called. No answer. She called again, voice steady and louder. Donna checked the log and the desk phone and tried not to think of the sound she had heard under the caller's voice. George stood in the doorway and watched the wall clock. A patrol car reached. Canyon Crest first. The brush truck sat where it should, keys gone, doors shut. The grate lay straight, bolt snug. No footprints told a story. Hal Derry arrived with his clipboard and found nothing to write. Neighbors peered from curtains and asked if anyone had heard a dog. No one had. The search began because that is what a town does. Volunteers formed lines. Flashlights threw coins of light into sage and ditch. Deputies knocked on doors. The river was checked because the river is always checked. The Perrine Bridge stood black against a dark sky. Divers went in where the rocks make a long hush. Dogs sniffed and lay down as if confused by too much night. Ruth moved like a compass that refused to settle. Caleb walked the ditch banks until dawn, saying June's name until his throat hurt. Morning arrived hard. Maps went out on hoods. Reporters asked careful questions and then careless ones. Someone said they had seen a strange car. Someone else remembered a fight that probably never happened. The twins' coats still hung together on the same hook. No one touched them. Days slid into weeks. Tips dried. The phone at the station rang. Less. Ruth carried the empty feeling like a hose line. Donna became a full dispatcher and kept in the back of a drawer the tape from the call with the faint bell on it. Hal Derry closed his clipboard and opened it again. Bert Keeler cut ribbons on 2 new buildings. George stopped making chili for a while. Years changed store signs and paint, but not the bones of the town. In 2011, on Addison Avenue West, a gardener named Earl Darnell dug a square of ground for tulips. He was a quiet man who named his tools, because names keep you company. The shovel was Grace. He pressed Grace into the soil, and the dirt slid in a clean sheet that became a small collapse. He blinked into the hole. 2 shapes lay there, close as sleep, held by the brown hands of earth. Ivory curved where faces should be. Yellow sleeves showed through the dirt, reflective bands gone dull. A right hand rested on a left shoulder. A left hand cupped a jaw. Jackets. Fire jackets. Earl did not shout. He stood very still and let the world line up. By the time the first siren wailed, neighbors were already at the edge of the lawn, whispering the only story they wanted. "It's them," someone said. "The Carver girls." Candles appeared before the tape. A woman set flowers by a sprinkler head. A boy who had once owned a beagle took off his hat. Word ran downhill through Twin Falls. People stepped out of shops and frozen doorways. Old men straightened. Young mothers lifted children so they could see the yellow in the ground. The station bell rang once and then did not ring again. The jackets in the hole did not speak, but they promised what 32 years of hope had. Promised every day that the waiting was over and the twins had finally come home. The town believed, because belief is how a heart keeps breathing. People held hands on the sidewalk and said the same soft prayer, "Let it be them, let it be thee, girls." By dusk, the field on Addison Avenue West looked like church and worksite at the same time. Yellow tape fluttered. A white tent went up over the hole. People stood back, hands together, as if the ground itself could hear them. The twins' names moved from mouth to mouth like a hymn. The first unmarked sedan stopped without hurry. A tall man stepped out, jacket neat, tie plain. He carried a pencil and a pocket full of index cards. Sergeant Hank Leland nodded to Earl Darnell, to the neighbors, to the tape, to the sky. He had a habit that arrived before his voice, a few bars of take 5, thin and low, like a kettle cooling. Then the pencil went to work. He wrote on a 3x5, Discovery Site, Addison W., Earl Darnell, 1,800 hours. He wrote another, Jackets. Yellow, reflective bands dull. He did not look busy. He looked exact. The second car brought a woman with a canvas bag and a camera older than most phones. Iris Ko, freelancer from Boise, introduced herself to no one in particular and to everyone at once. She carried a small corkboard and a handful of pushpins. She took a Polaroid of the tent, shook it, pinned it. She took another of Earl's shovel, leaning against the fence, and wrote, "Grace, the shovel, point of collapse." People stared. She smiled. "Pictures are just slow notes," she said. Forensic techs worked soft. Brushes, scoops, paper envelopes. They talked in numbers, not names. One lifted a sleeve with a spatula and showed Hank what time had done to cloth. The weave was tired but still there. Another found a pocket and, very gently, turned it. A small brass keychain slid out, greened around the edges, stamped with 9B. In the other jacket, a round coin of metal showed a film reel and the words Roxy Theater. Hank wrote 2 new cards and set them side by side, as if the objects might start a conversation. Candles appeared on the curb. A high school girl set a jar down with a note inside. "Thank you for saving my uncle in '78. A man from the rodeo brought a belt buckle with 2 tiny angels and left it near the tape. Hat held to his chest." People told each other the same 3 stories about the twins. The trailer fire with the photo, the hydrant fixed with a hairpin, the beagle who decided thunderstorms were not so bad. Memory let the town stand a little straighter. At the edge of the scene, Captain Ruth Arnett stood, like someone who has been cold for a long time and refuses a coat. In her fingers, a matchstick clicked, wood against wood, not lit. She answered one question and then another. They were on time, she said. On time to everything, to courage, to care. The match clicked again. She pocketed it before. It snapped. Donna Markley came after finishing her shift at dispatch. She wore a cardigan, carried a silence, and kept looking at the desk phone in her head. When she found Ruth, she took her hand. "I keep hearing the ring," she said. "Not." The radio. The ring. Ruth squeezed once and let go. Hank walked the perimeter, whistled 2 soft bars, and asked Earl to point where the ground first gave. Earl showed him the clean edge and the dark seam where dirt had slid. Iris took a Polaroid from directly above, waited, pinned it next to a new card. Hank wrote, "Orientation of bodies, embrace, left over right. By midnight." The remains were bagged with care and labeled. The jackets went into separate boxes. The brass keychain and the Roxy token were sealed in plastic envelopes and logged. Hank checked each line with a finger and a hum. "When a town lies," he said to no one, "it leaves receipts." Morning. Brought casseroles to Station 3 and a folding table under the flag. Someone from the funeral home asked about dates. The church reserved space. A printer offered programs. Bert Keeler, the developer with a warm handshake, promised to cover the cost for flowers worthy of heroes. People nodded. The bell at the station rang once at noon and then stayed still. Iris sat up in the corner of the bay with a corkboard and a pot of coffee. She pinned the Polaroid of the hole, the Polaroid of the shovel, the Polaroid of a child's drawing of 2 firefighters, holding hands. She drew a line of red string from Addison W. to Canyon Crest, wrote 1979, last call, dog in drain in black marker, and circled it. "Maps are just stories with patience," she said. Hank took his cards and laid them like tiles. 1979 call, Canyon Crest, 9B, Roxy token, jackets, embrace. He added one more, who benefits. The pencil paused. A few bars of take 5, breathed out and faded. In the afternoon, he asked Donna to sit with him in the office of the bay. She folded her hands and unfolded them. "I was a trainee," she said. "I did what I was told." But the call that night did not come over the radio. It came over the desk phone. A man said, "Dog stuck in the storm drain at Canyon Crest." He did not give a name. Behind him I heard a bell. Not church, Metal, ding ding. Like the crossing by the sugar factory. She opened her purse and took out a small microcassette in a labeled case. I kept a copy. I wanted to forget, and I couldn't, so I kept this instead. Hank did not scold. He wrote a card. 1979 call. Microcassette exists. Background bell. He slid the tape back to her for the moment. We'll log it the right way, he said. Thank you. The town moved as if through water. A joint funeral was scheduled for the weekend at the high school gym. The choir rehearsed 3 hymns. The local paper printed a photo of the twins in their helmets with the caption, "Home at last." People brought cards to the station for Ruth to read. George went back to making chili and said to the pot, "Be kind." Hank and Iris drove the evidence to the regional lab. The building was square and quiet. Inside, everything had a number. A tech named Marisol photographed the jackets from shoulder to cuff. She measured stitches and the widths of reflective tape. She found a worn tag inside a liner and pointed with a gloved finger. Different supplier than the 70s, she said. This pattern saw it when I dated gear for Kimberly. Fire last year, early 90s. Kimberly? Iris asked. Not Twin Falls? Not our district, Marisol said. She made notes that looked like a foreign alphabet and weighed a small button in her palm. The bones told their own facts in a softer room. A medical examiner spoke without decoration. Pelvic inlet, sciatic notch. 1 set reads male. He ticked other markers, a floating rib, a tooth with a filling type popular in the 80s. Hank's pencil stalled above the card he had already written home at last on. He turned the card over and wrote no doubt the call to Station 3 was brief and heavy. Plans paused. The choir stopped mid-verse. On Main Street, people read the update on their phones and then looked at the sky as if the answer might be there. Grief. Had to stand up and try again in another shape. Ruth came to the lab in a gray sweater and did not sit until someone told her she could. She listened, straight-backed, to each sentence. 1 skeleton male, jackets not from Twin Falls, gear dated after 1990. She did not ask the question everyone else asked. She stared at the boxes where the jackets lay and said, very quietly, "So, they are still somewhere else." Iris took a Polaroid of the tag inside the yellow sleeve. She pinned it next to a photo of the Roxy token. Why would somebody wear a jacket from Kimberly? She asked aloud. To die in Twin Falls? Hank set down 2 cards. Kimberly Gear, 1990s, and Roxy Theater, closed since late 70s. He added a third, 9B, valve, marker. He held the brass keychain again. It fit in his palm like a coin you carry for luck or death. Back at the station, people rewrote posters and tried to explain the new shape of the not knowing to their children. Candles still burned, but now the prayers sounded different. Earl Darnell stood by his patch of ground and promised the dirt a proper flower bed when the work was done. "I'll plant for whoever they are," he said, "and for who they aren't." Hank laid his cards in a new order as if shuffling would make a picture appear. 1979 call. Canyon Crest, background bell, 9B, Roxy token, Kimberly jackets, male remains. He whistled, take 5 in a slow loop and waited for the note that would not come. Iris taped butcher paper to the wall and drew a thin line from the sugar factory crossing to Canyon Crest to Addison W. "If you follow the water," she said, "you get a map the streets don't show." Donna arrived at sunset with the microcassette. In a clear bag, label neat, Canyon Crest, call -1979 copy. Hank signed for it, set it on the desk, and breathed in like a diver. "Let's hear the beginning again," he said. They gathered around a small player that looked like a toy from another life. Donna pressed play. Static cleared its throat. A man's voice came thin and hurried. Dog stuck in the storm drain. "At Canyon Crest. Please hurry." No name. No click of a hung-up receiver. Then, faint and patient under it, came the sound Donna remembered and had never escaped the railroad crossing near the sugar plant, counting time for a town that had stopped counting. Ding, ding. The tape clicked off, but the sound stayed in the room. Ding, ding. Hank wrote it down anyway, the way he wrote everything. Then he and Iris went to see where a bell like that would live. The groundskeeper at Canyon Springs Golf was a man with a straw hat and a coffee can of teas. He pointed to a square of faded concrete near the snack window. "Used to be a payphone right there," he said. "Took it out ages ago. Back then you could hear the trains from the sugar factory if the wind went right." The crossing was less than a mile as the crow flies. Wind moved through the cottonwoods. If you listened, you could almost hear the past. Hank noted the base bolts and took down the install year from an old utility tag the groundskeeper kept in a drawer. 1978. Iris took a Polaroid of the empty square, wrote payphone base, Canyon Springs, and pinned it to her corkboard in the passenger seat. "Our caller stood here," she said. "He had coins and a reason to hide." Back at CityWorks, a thin man in a blue shirt with salt at the armpits unrolled maps. Leo Pike, engineer with the water department, smelled like copper and dust. He adjusted his glasses 3 times before he spoke. "We have 2 systems," he said, tapping paper with a pencil. "The open canals and the pressurized lines. The old irrigation laterals were numbered, then renumbered. 9B here is a lateral valve installed when Canyon Crest was new. There are inspection chambers 6 feet high, some bigger where lines meet. Some are in the books, some aren't." "Not in the books?" Iris asked. "Developments move faster than maps," Leo said, and the sweat grew shiny above his lip. He kept touching the square that held the number 9B. If someone wanted to go down without being seen, a chamber would do. "I'm not saying anyone did. I'm saying water goes where people forget to look." They went to Canyon Crest in a city truck with a rattle in the dash. Leo brought a keyring like a jailer's and a notebook with the edges softened by years of pockets. The air by the curb had the smell of wet iron. A grate wore a skin of dust. The bolts had the stubborn look of things that prefer the past. Jenny had once teased such bolts into moving with a hairpin. Today, Hank used a breaker bar and patience. Earl Darnell came too, because he said the dirt and he were having a conversation, and he didn't want to be rude. They lifted the grate and the tended gate and the dirt. Breath of the chamber rose, cool and metallic. Iris switched on a headlamp and read the walls like a low mural. Initials, dates, a heart around 2 letters that had flaked to nothing. Farther in, someone had chalk arrows years ago that washed to ghosts. The number 9B was stamped into a steel plate on the floor, and to the left a smaller panel sat crooked, held by 2 screws that did not match the others. Hank crouched. "Not factory," he said. Ruth arrived and stood at the lip looking down. She did not ask if it was safe. "When the twins were probies," she said, "I taught them to read the city. Streets tell you what people want you to see. Water tells you what they forgot. Water carries secrets out and brings them back." She looked at the odd panel. "If they left us anything, they would have tucked it where the city drinks." The 2 mismatched screws came free with a squeal. Behind the panel was a pocket the size of a lunch pail. Inside it sat a glass jar with a zinc lid, the kind you keep nails in. Hank eased it out, wiped mud with his sleeve, and unscrewed the top. Paper breathed out a damp smell. The first paper was a news clipping cut with blunt scissors. In the margin, dates were underlined in colored pencil. A warehouse fire, a vacant house fire, a shed fire behind an old motel. Each was followed in neat block letters by a name, Keeler Properties. "He bought after," Iris said, "every time." The second item stole the light for a moment. A Polaroid of June and Jenny in their helmets, cheeks smudged, eyes bright in the sharp way adrenaline leaves you. Across the white border, there were letters that looked wrong until Ruth held the picture up to the metal plate like a mirror. The message reversed and then came clear, June's left-handed trick. If we don't come back, follow the water. Ruth swallowed. They had a plan, she said. Her voice softened just once. They left it for the day the town listened. Hank laid the clipping and the Polaroid on a towel like relics. Iris took a Polaroid of the Polaroid and pinned it to her board with a note. Mirror writing. June. Leo Pike stared at the jar as if it might accuse him. When Hank said 9B again, Leo's grip tightened on the notebook. Why does that number make you sweat? Iris asked, not unkind. It's old work, Leo said. We sealed some chambers around here after a kid got stuck in '76. Some valves became dead ends. People asked us to keep lids shut so no one would wander. Developers liked quick answers. He dabbed his forehead with a folded napkin. He produced from his pocket. I just keep the water in the pipes. Hank wrote Leo, sealed chambers, quick answers on a card and tucked it away. He also wrote Keeler, buys after fires, and below that, Derry, inspector, clipboard. The last time Hank had seen Hal Derry's clipboard, he'd noticed eraser scars where 2 street names should have been. It was the sort of detail a pencil man remembers. They climbed out for air. On the sidewalk, Ruth turned the Polaroid over, in her hands like a compass. Earl leaned on the truck and let the air do its work in his lungs. If water is a road, he said, then roads have mailboxes. He pointed with his chin at a short stanchion beside the chamber, capped with a metal tube no one had noticed because it looked like the stump of a sign. What's that little fella? Leo blinked. Could be a pneumatic tube. Some subdivisions put them in for plansets and meters back when someone thought that was modern. Most are dead. Hank crouched and felt for weld marks. The cap had a lever corroded in place. Earl grinned, rolled his shoulders, and said, Let's not be rude. This here is Matilda. He wrapped both hands on the lever. Matilda, meet Earl. Earl, behave yourself. The lever did not move. Earl rocked it, told a story about a tractor in '72, rocked it again. The rust gave a sigh that sounded almost human. Hank steadied the tube. Leo looked like a man watching his favorite chair break. Earl set his jaw, and Matilda came free with a small hoop of air that had not moved in decades. Inside the tube, wrapped in waxed paper and a rubber band, sat a rectangular card and a folded note. The card was thick and official. First Interstate. Bank across the top, a number. A line, safe deposit access minus 1,980. The note was written in the same backward hand June used when she wanted to be clever. Ruth held it to the tube's shiny cap like a mirror. The words stood upright. Ruth knows. J&J. No one spoke. The street's small sounds came back one by one. A sprinkler ticking, a screen door, the far laugh of a child. Leo stuffed the napkin back in his pocket and pretended to cough. Iris took a Polaroid of the card, another of the note held to the mirror metal, wrote safe deposit, year after, and message to Ruth on them, and pressed both photos on her board with 2 fierce red pins. Hank filed new cards. Bank card minus 1,980. Message, Ruth knows. He flipped through the older ones until he reached the one that simply said, Who benefits? Then he looked up at Ruth. She was not crying. She was not even blinking more than usual. But something in her face had put on armor and locked it from the inside. She folded the note once, then again, and slid it into a bag marked as evidence. The way you lay a hand on a shoulder so a friend can stand. The circle widened. Caleb Morrow. Rolled up in his dented truck and said he had pictures from the Harvest Days parade of '79 if anyone wanted to see. Iris did. One photo showed the Roxy Theater in the background and Caleb's pickup parked too close to a fire lane. Caleb winced. I was dropping off scrap for the float, he said. Ask anybody. Hank wrote Caleb, Roxy, photo, and alibi, scrap for float. Meanwhile, Hal Derry's name returned in conversation like a cough you can't shake. Hal had addresses on his board that turned to smoke, Earl murmured. Then the board looked cleaner than a Sunday plate. The sun slid and the day thinned. The jar, the clipping, the Polaroid, the bank card, and the note lay between them like pieces of a map. The words Ruth knows glowed without light. Hank tucked his cards back into his pocket. He didn't whistle this time. He looked at Ruth, who was still holding herself very straight, and spoke in the tone you use when you need a truth you would. "Rather not here, Captain," he said. "May I have a talk with you behind a closed door?" The door closed. Ruth stood by the file cabinet, hands on cool metal. Hank left his index cards face down and waited. They weren't just firefighters, Ruth said. They watched patterns. In '79, the fires lined up with real estate. Empty. Places, underinsured places. After smoke, Keeler bought cheap. He brought coffee and thanks. I smelled gasoline under the sugar. She rolled a matchstick and didn't strike it. A woman came to me late, outside the station, headscarf on, voice shaking. She said there was talk the twins would be quieted, not arrested, not warned. Quieted. I believed her. I told the girls to keep notes, only we would understand. June wrote in mirror. Jenny hid things where screws never match. I taught them to carry chalk and string. We practiced in the bay after midnight. Ruth met Hank's eyes. If heat came close, they were to go by the water down through 9B, use the chambers, leave signs, find a road, call me from a payphone. If they couldn't call, leave something I would know. That's why the tube held my name. Hank breathed. Once, "Thank you, we'll put it on paper." By noon, he had a judge's order, and Iris had a very polite smile for the bank. First Interstate smelled like carpet cleaner and a promise. A manager read the order twice, buzzed a guard, and said, "2 keys." The vault door moved on wheels. The safe deposit box slid out like a drawer from another life. A witness watched. Pens set, as if signatures made the past behave. Inside, 2 VHS tapes labeled March 5, 1980 and April 2, 1980, and a sealed manila envelope. No cash, no ring, just tape and paper held like breath. Back at the station they found a TV and VCR. Iris tested fast forward, and the machine sighed like it remembered. Ruth sat straight. Hank stacked cards and left the top blank. The first tape showed the church hall, folding chairs, a hand-painted banner, coffee in tall urns. June and Jenny in uniform stood beside a lawyer from Boise. On the table sat a wooden box with brass corners. June spoke clear. "We've logged 3 fires with the same marks. We copied insurance notes, pulled permit lists, and mapped water. That went missing. If anything happens to us, this box goes to the county and the papers." Jenny added, "If nothing happens, we pretend tonight was about pie." People gave a small laugh and held its breath again. The second tape was shorter. Same hall, same banner. The lawyer alone. "The box has been moved for safekeeping," he said, voice low. He would release it on request by Ruth Arnott and a named prosecutor. He held up a sealed envelope and slid it into a bag. Off camera. "Where is it now?" He said, "Somewhere." No one looks. Tape hiss, blue screen. Silence took a seat. Iris said, "The box vanished after the first tape. The envelope he showed isn't this one. So where did this envelope come from?" Hank opened the station's envelope with a knife. That felt like a pen. Inside were Map City, Utility, and a few sketched in green pencil with June's left-leaning labels. Blue lines for water, red for fires. In the margins, June wrote times and wind. 3 intersections circled with dates that matched the clipping from the jar. On the back of the last sheet, in backward letters, a line you needed a reflection to. "Read. Separate water from fire and you'll find the road." A small arrow pointed north. Ruth touched a circle. "She's saying, untangle the stories, don't follow sirens. Follow pipes. 2 paths took shape. First, Hank said, we rebuild the route the twins took that night where 9B connects, where a person could climb unseen. Second, we follow the money Keeler's buys, Derry's inspections, the claims. We stack them against the fires. He wrote the 2 tracks on a card like mile markers. Iris pinned Polaroids to butcher paper and drew blue lines. Start here, she said, tapping the Canyon Springs payphone. Our caller made sure we heard the train, so the twins would choose 9B, not a dog a door. She added the chamber wall with mismatched screws. Someone worked this panel. Before, Hank combed records with a librarian's patience. In permit books, pages had been torn and recopied. The seam of a staple told on the lie. In Derry's log, 2 addresses were erased and rewritten. You could still see the old letters. Under the shine. He wrote them and underlined twice. At the county recorder, a clerk rolled microfiche while Hank copied deed transfers. Keeler and a chain of LLCs repeated until the page looked like an echo. An insurance adjuster remembered a claim filed hours after a fire was still smoking. Ruth stayed close. Hank asked softly, "Did you tell them more?" "I told them to leave signs only we'd recognize. To make noise in quiet places so the right ears would itch. Aim north if they couldn't come back. And if they had to change names, keep the work." She looked at her hands. "I told them I'd take the heat. I was the captain. Orders are just promises in uniform." The admission changed the air without opening a window. It made the room honest and tired. Hank wrote Ruth directed entry at 9B, breadcrumb trail, and kept the card under his thumb. Donna stood in the doorway with the microcassette in her palm, like a prayer you could rewind. They walked the path on paper, then outside. Iris counted steps between chambers, noted fences added in the 90s. Leo Pike unlocked a hatch he said nobody used and looked away while Hank went down. The walls wore chalk arrows washed thin. At one turn, Hank's light found a small scratch that might be a J. It was enough to keep hope standing. By dusk, they had copies, a list of deeds, and the outline of a road no street map showed. Hank brewed coffee. Earl popped in and offered a crowbar he called Floyd if more levers needed encouragement. George tried a gentler chili. Laughter kept the chairs from cracking. Outside, the flag stirred and someone lit a candle on the station steps. The phone rang with the lab's number. Hank put it on speaker. The medical examiner's voice was steady. "Dental records from 2. Old arrests match the remains from Addison West. Names are Owen Rusk and Lila Penn. Both missing since 1980. Report incoming." The line went quiet. Iris sat without noticing. Ruth closed her eyes and opened them. Hank wrote the names and placed the card beside the Polaroid of the yellow sleeve. 2 people no one had prayed for lay under the ground where a city had lit candles. 2 small-time thieves wore coats they did not earn. The room listened to the quiet. Then the question arrived, simple and heavy. If Owen and Lila were in that hole, why those jackets, and where, after all these years, were June and Jenny? The names Owen Rusk and Lila Penn landed like small, heavy stones. They were not heroes. They were the sort of people towns try not to remember. Quick with lies, slow with rent, handy when someone rich needed hands they could disown. Records showed petty thefts, a forged title, a storage unit broken into and emptied out. In bondsman notes and old police reports, their names sat beside another, Keeler. Not written plain, but there in phone numbers and cash withdrawals that lined up with his projects. Hank wrote on a card, "Owen and Lila, cleaners of trouble." Iris went looking for faces to match the type. At a bar turned breakfast place, an old bartender said, "They came in when the music died, sat at the corner so nobody had to see them. If someone wanted a thing lost, they were the kind who would carry it to water." He stirred his coffee and added, "They laughed at the wrong time. The jackets in the ground bothered everyone." Marisol at the lab called 2 departments. Kimberly Fire had replaced gear in the early 90s after a flood turned their wash bay into a mess. For a few weeks, jackets hung outside a self-serve wash rack behind the station while the washer was fixed. One night, 2 went missing. Someone filed a report that never left a drawer. Hank penciled, jackets lifted from Kimberly wash rack till the 1991-92 dot, a shape formed. Owen and Lila, hired to throw dirt on the twins case. If you want a town to stop looking, you give it a grave it can bear. Put yellow coats on nameless bones. Drop a token from the Roxy in a pocket so the past hums. Bury a keychain stamped 9B so the story points back to water and away from men. Then wait for the find and let the city light candles for the wrong reason. They tried. The spot on Addison sat above the old sugar plant gallery's airless veins. Under the neighborhood. They dug shallow because shallow is faster. They did not know the ground under their knees was a lid. The gallery had been weakened years before, not by water but by time and shortcuts. When the dirt slid, they went with it. Shoulder to shoulder in a narrow fall, they grabbed each other because that is what you do when the earth becomes a mouth. The jackets they'd stolen became shrouds they never meant to wear. The embrace the town mistook for love was just the last shape 2 people make when the ceiling comes down. To see if that picture held, Hank needed to hear from the pipes. Leo Pike stood in the utility office with his fingers worrying a paper. Edge, he had sweat at the rim of his hairline again. Back then, he said, I was told to seal holes. Parents were scared. Developers wanted clean lines. There were lids we welded and junctions we filled with rock and rebar. He tapped a faded plat. 9B feeds a spider of laterals and old plant tunnels. You could walk a good distance under. There before you saw daylight. If somebody was trying to move quiet, that's the door they'd take. He looked at the floor. I did what I was told. I didn't ask who said the words. Hank did not comfort him. He wrote, Leo, sealed exits at direction of big folks. Ruth set a matchstick on the table and rolled it straight under her finger. We used those same lines to teach probies how cities really work, she said. It is not a sin to know the map. It is a sin to sell it. Iris laid June's maps beside city plats and traced with a pencil. Blue for water, red for fire. She marked the 9B chamber, the Canyon Springs payphone, the Addison lot. Then she looked beyond Twin Falls. June had drawn thin arrows at margins and scribbled times you wouldn't notice unless you believed in mirror letters and left hands. One arrow wore a small N. Another page, folded deep in the envelope, had a sketch of pine trees, quick and certain, June's kind of drawing when she needed to leave a whisper. North, Iris said. Not a word, a direction. They wanted us to stop staring at our own feet. They followed the blue lines north on paper to where the irrigation ditches spread their fingers and met county culverts. In the archives, a clerk with a jar of peppermint found a maintenance report from the week after the twins vanished. A crew had cleared debris near County Road 41, where a culvert spit out mud and sticks and women's footwear, size small, muddy beyond salvage. No one logged a name. A note at the bottom read, trucker reported 2 women hitchhiking, covered in ditch, northbound at dawn. Hank and Iris drove to the diner at that intersection because diners remember what the county forgets. The waitress, gray braid, hands. Quick said, the truck stop used to be across the road. I made pancakes for a driver who told me he'd picked up 2 women the morning. The radio went crazy about your girls. Said they were polite and real tired. He dropped them at a bus station. 3 towns up. He didn't like telling it. He said people wanted ghosts, not mud. Back in the bay at Station 3, the corkboard changed shape. Iris pinned a Polaroid of the Unnan Pines page, wrote north, not home, and tied a string from 9B to County Road 41 to bus station. Hank added a fresh card. Next step. Where would 2 women go to keep doing the work under different names? He knew only a few places take strangers and ask them to jump straight into smoke. He called a friend in. Boise, who knew a man in Missoula who still kept a Rolodex under a stack of maps. He called a retired USFS dispatcher who said his memories were better than his knees. He sent faxes because some doors still opened that way. The ask was simple: female wildland firefighters appearing around 1981, with thin backstories and skills ahead of their paperwork. The answer took a day and an afternoon. 2 records ping, the dispatcher said over a line that clicked like old wire. Sisters who trained with a smoke jumper crew in Fairbanks in '81, not real sisters on paper. But you know how paper lies. They were good. The notes say strong on saw, calm under spot fire. One left-handed, wrote funny on forms. Their pre-assignments are light. He paused. The names they used aren't the ones you're looking for. Ruth set the matchstick down. Her hands had gone very still. If they got that far, she said, they didn't run from the fire. They ran to it. Hank's pencil hovered. He wrote, Fairbanks, 1981. 2 women. Left hand noted. He did not whistle. Iris took a Polaroid of the card itself and pinned it under the N. If the maps are a promise, she said, this is the part where the promise keeps itself. They had one more ask out to the north. Any articles or scrapbooks from early '80s about jumpers lost or honored. Old news likes to stay folded under beds. That evening, as the light went long, the station printer woke and coughed out an email from a retired ranger in Galena, Alaska. He had a newspaper photo from 1983, clipped and glued into a book that smelled like cedar. He had scanned both sides, because he liked the back almost more than the front. On the front, a black and white shot of a hillside blurred by wind. 2 smoke jumpers lay under blankets, helmets set beside them. Men in line looked like prayer. The caption, Wind shift takes 2, on the back. In pencil that pressed hard and leaned wrong, there was a small drawing of 3 pine trees, and, beside them, one word written backwards so that you needed a mirror or a certain kind of memory to see it true. It was just a name, the one that fit like a left glove. The room took a breath it had been holding since 1979. Ruth did not reach for a match. Earl said nothing, for once letting the air do the talking. Donna touched the microcassette through her purse as if the bell inside it had known the end of this sentence. Hank set the scan on the table and watched the pencil marks settle into the wood. He put 1 card on top of the pile. They chose to keep working and said it out loud so the building would hear it. They chose to continue. The board on the wall waited, full of lines. The names on the printer waited for someone to say them in the right order. The photo from 1983 waited for a match to the living facts, because stories deserve proof, even when proof looks like smoke. The case asked, quietly and firmly, for the last confirmation. The photo from 1983 lay on the table like a door finally unlocked. Hank called numbers until the rings stopped feeling long. The Forest Service sent a cautious email first, then a phone call, then a scanned page from an old roster that still smelled of copy toner through the screen. 2 female firefighters had entered a smoke jumper program in Fairbanks in 1981 with new names and thin histories. A note in the margin read, referred by counsel. Temporary clearance pending. The counsel's name matched the lawyer from Boise. On the VHS tape, the lawyer took Hank's call after a pause that sounded like a man measuring memory against risk. I advised 2 clients, he said. They had information that would hurt men who built things out of ashes. A federal friend said there was a path. Not witness protection, not exactly. Work protection. Put them where their skills would be useful, their names quiet, and their enemies far. I did not see them again. Hank wrote on a card, transfer equals. Extra official, Boise Council Bridge. Iris reached veterans who kept their own archives, shoeboxes with photos, names written on tape. A jumper from that era remembered 2 women who moved like one. One wrote sideways and backwards on the whiteboard, he said, laughing softly. said it made her think. The other kept a tin of pins and bent wire into tools when gear went. Stubborn, we called them the twins, but not out loud. You learn not to say what paper doesn't bless. Piece by piece, the road north stopped feeling like rumor. Incident reports from 1,981 listed spot fires cut clean and saw work praised. In brief lines. In the margins, a training officer scribbled lefty on saw steady under gust, and fixes buckles with nonsense, but it works. The nonsense looked a lot like a hairpin. They asked for the after action on the 1983 wind event. The report described a fire that had chewed through tundra all afternoon, easy and low, until weather turned traitor. Wind shifted hard and rolled the line. A crew on the flank lost their anchor. 2 jumpers cut secondary line in brush where no one wanted to go, then spotted ember runs and stepped in front like hands catching dishes. The main crew escaped into the black they had cut earlier. The 2 did not. A medic's note, respiration. Ceased before lift, no recovery possible until morning. The morning never gave them back. Hank said the report beside the newspaper photo. On the back of that photo, the little drawing of 3 pines and the mirror-scrawled name matched the habit. The town already knew. He didn't need a glass. His mind did the flipping now. The Forest Service History Unit agreed to a cross-reference, handwriting samples from training boards, notes about handedness, tool habits, the testimony of 3 veterans, the Boise councils, statement, and the timing of their appearance right after Twin Falls went dark. The email came 2 days later with careful words and a wide wait. While the names on roster remain as recorded, the service recognizes the overwhelming likelihood that the 2 jumpers were the individuals formerly known in Twin Falls as June and Jenny Carver. The record of their actions on date 1983 is hereby acknowledged as line of duty sacrifice. Ruth read the sentence twice. Then she stood at the bay door and looked north until her eyes watered and she blamed the wind, while the north gave its answer. The town's own paperwork finally did what the twins had built it to do. The box of documents recovered from the safe deposit now scanned, cataloged, and double-checked went to the prosecutor. Insurance notes showed claims filed fast and payouts that ran through companies in Keeler's chain. Permit lists showed erasures that matched the clipboard scars in Hal Derry's hand. Mapping programs, guided by June's blue lines, drew fires and deeds together like teeth on a zipper. An investigator who once called the old case unfortunate called this new file arson in a suit. The county held a quiet press conference in a room with flags and tired chairs. The statement was brief. Prior rulings of accidental and undetermined were reopened and revised. Patterns once dismissed as coincidence now met the standards for conspiracy. The Carver sisters, the prosecutor said, acted with integrity. It is the position of this office that their work was sound and their concerns warranted. They were not reckless. They were right. He paused, and they paid for it. People in Twin Falls did what towns do with truth that took too long. They made a place for it. The memorial at Station 3 had always been a glass case with a flag, a bell rope, and a shelf that wanted company. Hank asked a local smith to make 2 simple plaques. The letters were the kind that last: June Carver, Jenny Carver. On a small frame between them, the Polaroid from the jar, 2 faces still bright under grit, and the edge were mirror letters. Once told of future to be patient, they gathered near sundown. The bay doors were open to the street, and the street had come and stood without being asked. Donna held the microcassette hidden in her sleeve like a talisman she was finally ready to set down. Iris had drafted her story a dozen times and still changed the order of 2 sentences because stories deserve the best room you can give them. Earl wore clean boots and carried a paper bag with bulbs inside. Fragile and pointed, the color of hope before it learns green. Hank spoke plainly. He did not say law words. He named work. He named persistence. He named a town that did not give up on its own. He told the short version of the long road north, the payphone, the bell, the water, the tube, the note, the coffer, the maps, the wind. He set the 9B keychain on the shelf between the plaques. It looked small and perfect there. A coin finally spent on the right thing. Ruth lit a match and held the flame for a breath. "In training," she said, "we teach you to respect fire and not to fear it." These two respected it so much they followed it to the end of the earth. She closed her fingers over the match and pinched the flame out. Smoke lifted like a thin ribbon and disappeared. "They were never lost," she said. "They were working." Iris read a paragraph from the piece she would publish that night. She had chosen a title that came from the girls themselves. "Follow the water." The line she read was simple. "They left us a map, and we took too long to learn to read it." The day we did, the town found that heroes do not live only in the places we bury them. They live in the places they walk toward. People filed past the glass. Some touched the case. Some only stood near it and breathed slower. George set bowls of chili on a table and said the recipe had forgiven him. Leo Pike kept to the back, hat in hands, and listened as if listening could fix old welds. Hal Derry did not come dot after the crowd thinned. Earl walked to the lot on Addison with a trowel and the bag of tulip bulbs. The ground had been closed and leveled, neat and undecorated. He knelt and spoke to the dirt the way he always had. "Two for the ones we found," he said softly, meaning Owen and Lila, who had been given their names back even if no one liked saying them. "And two for the ones we didn't, because not finding is not the same as not knowing." He pressed the bulbs into cool earth with a tenderness that made the act a prayer. "Grow," he told them. Before midnight, the article went live, and the town quietly lit up. People read it in kitchens, on porches, even in parked cars outside Station 3, because sometimes you want to be close to a place while learning what it truly means. The responses were simple and heartfelt. A smoke jumper from Alaska wrote thank you, and a local who'd once been comforted by June's voice said, "I fixed my smoke alarm today." The next morning, Station 3 received an envelope from the Forest Service. Inside was a formal statement adding two names recorded under aliases, but believed beyond doubt to be June and Jenny Carver, to its memorial roll, honoring their sacrifice in 1983. Ruth read it aloud, and no one applauded. They simply stood. Taller. Life moved on, but lighter now. The recovered box of documents quietly advanced arson cases tied to Keeler and Derry, clearing the sisters' names. Insurance companies began settling claims, and the town bought 2 new cadet helmets, writing Carver inside in pencil for luck. That evening, with the bay doors open, the plaques bearing their real names caught the last light, the 9B keychain resting between them. Somewhere to the east, the railroad crossing near the sugar plant sounded its 2 familiar notes, ding, ding. The sisters had not been found in the ground, but on the road they chose, leaving behind a legacy of courage, direction, and endurance.